I never thought the person sleeping next to me every night was planning my death. But that's exactly what was happening, and if I hadn't overheard one conversation, I'd probably be dead right now. My name is Rachel, and I'm 43 years old. I live in Redding, California, where I used to teach elementary school before I got too sick to work. I was married for 8 years to a man named Mark, and on the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. Everyone always told me how lucky I was. Mark is so supportive, they'd say. He really takes care of you. If only they knew the truth. It all started about a year and a half ago when I began feeling off. At first, it was small things minus just being tired all the time, getting dizzy when I stood up to fast. But then it became more serious. I started losing weight without trying. Some days, I couldn't get out of bed without help. My hands would shake, my heart would race then slow down unpredictably. It was terrifying. I went to multiple doctors, and they ran every test imaginable. But they could only give me vague diagnoses minus possible autoimmune disorder, chronic fatigue syndrome, maybe MS. Nothing was ever definite, and nothing explained why I was deteriorating so rapidly. Through it all, Mark was there. At first, he seemed like the perfect husband. He drove me to every appointment, kept a detailed folder with all my test results, reminded me to take my medications. He bought me soft blankets and special pillows, made smoothies packed with vitamins and supplements. He held me when I cried from frustration and fear. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive to have someone so devoted. But gradually, things started feeling off in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on. He became increasingly overbearing. He didn't want me driving anymore, claiming I was too fragile. At first, I agreed minus I was exhausted and scared of having an episode behind the wheel. But then I realized I hadn't left the house alone in weeks. He insisted on organizing all my medications, saying I was too forgetful to manage it myself. He kept all the pill bottles in a locked drawer in the kitchen, and I didn't even have the keys. It's just to keep things organized, he'd say with that caring smile I'd grown to love. One day, I noticed something strange. One of my pills looked different minus it was supposed to be light blue, but this one was white. When I asked him about it, he brushed it off casually. It's the same medication, just a different brand, he explained. The pharmacy switched suppliers. I believed him completely. But I started noticing other things that didn't make sense. I was sleeping way too deeply, waking up in the exact same position I'd fallen asleep in, like I hadn't moved all night. My dreams were fuzzy and strange, like my brain had been wrapped in cotton. I'd be groggy and disoriented the entire next day, struggling to think clearly. When I mentioned this to Mark, he said it was just the illness progressing. Your body needs the rest, he'd say gently. Don't fight it. I didn't argue. I trusted him completely, and I was too sick and confused to trust my own judgment. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday, and I'd been extra tired that week, unable to keep my eyes open past 7 in the evening. Mark brought me tea that night, saying it would help me sleep better. I drank it gratefully, feeling loved and cared for. I remember lying in bed, watching him close the curtains and dim the lights with such tender attention to detail. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Rest now, sweetheart." I felt so safe, so protected. I must have drifted off, but something pulled me back to consciousness. I didn't move or open my eyes minus some instinct told me to stay perfectly still and just listen. That's when I heard voices coming from downstairs. His mother, Sharon, was there. I hadn't even realized she'd come over. Their voices were low, but I could hear just enough to make my blood run cold. Sharon said, "She's weaker now. It's almost time." Mark's response froze my heart. She won't even see it coming. I stopped breathing. I kept my body completely still, fighting every instinct to shake or gasp. I don't know how I managed it, but I forced myself to lie there like a statue while they continued talking. I couldn't make out the rest of their conversation, but I didn't need to. Those few words told me everything. After what felt like hours, I heard the front door open and close. I lay there, pretending to sleep, until I was absolutely certain they were both gone. Then I got up as quietly as possible and crept down the hallway. I saw light coming from under the office door, which was slightly ajar. I peeked in carefully minus no one was there, but his laptop was on. And there, right on the screen, was my name. It was an email draft, written as if I had composed it myself. It was addressed to my doctor, claiming that I'd been having worsening symptoms and wanted to try a new medication. It listed the name of a drug I didn't recognize, something that sounded foreign and complicated. I memorized the drug name as best I could, then clicked to another tab. My online medical chart was open, and he had gone through all my test results, highlighting sections and making notes. But these weren't just any notes minus, they were written as if they were from me, tracking symptoms and reporting things I had never said. Then I saw something that made my knees go weak. It was a receipt for the same drug mentioned in the email, but it wasn't from my regular pharmacy. It was from some overseas website that's old prescription medications without requiring an actual prescription. I stood there frozen, my mind racing to process what I was seeing. This was evidence of something much bigger and more sinister than I could have imagined. Then I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. I rushed back to bed as quietly as possible, climbed under the covers, and shut my eyes tight. He stood in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, just watching me. I kept my breathing slow and steady, praying he couldn't hear my heart pounding. Finally, he left, and I stayed awake the entire rest of the night. That was the moment I knew with absolute certainty that my husband was trying to kill me. I didn't sleep at all that night. My body stayed perfectly still, but my mind was racing at 1,000 miles an hour. I kept hearing Sharon's voice, she's weaker now. It's almost time. And Mark's calm, casual response, she won't even see it coming. The way he said it, like we were discussing what to have for dinner, made it even more terrifying. When morning came, I heard the coffee machine turn on downstairs. He was in the kitchen, humming softly like it was just another ordinary day. The normalcy of it all made me feel sick. I knew I had to get out, but I had no car, no spare keys, and no phone minus Mark had started taking it for safekeeping when I slept, claiming he didn't want me to be disturbed by notifications. I was completely trapped. I played sick that morning, which wasn't hard since I was genuinely terrified and shaking. I curled up under the covers and told him I felt too dizzy to stand. He offered to bring me breakfast in bed with that same caring voice he'd always used. I said yes, thinking that the less time he spent looking at me, the better. While he was in the kitchen, I forced myself to get up and search through everything I could reach quietly. I looked in my sock drawer behind the dresser, even under the loose floorboards under our bed. I was desperate to find something, anything, that could help me. Then I remembered an old winter coat hanging in the back of the closet. I checked the zipper pocket and found something I'd completely forgotten about, minus an emergency credit card I'd hidden there over a year ago. Mark had no idea it existed. It was my only way out. When he came back upstairs with eggs and toast, I was already under the covers again, pretending to be asleep. He stood there for a moment, and I could feel him watching me. "You're so tired lately," he said quietly. "Just rest, sweetheart." I didn't respond, and he left the tray on the nightstand before walking out. The tenderness in his voice, knowing what I now knew, made my skin crawl. When I finally heard the front door open and close, I waited another 5 minutes before getting up. I knew his schedule perfectly, minus he had a job site across town and would be gone for at least 4 hours. This was my one shot. I grabbed the credit card, threw on leggings and a sweatshirt, pulled in a hat low over my head, and started walking. My legs felt like jelly, but pure adrenaline carried me forward. There was a CVS about a mile away, and somehow I made it there. I went straight to the pharmacy window and asked the technician if she could tell me about the drug name I'd memorized from the email. I said it was for a friend who was curious about a medication her doctor had mentioned. The technician typed it into her computer, then looked at me with a strange expression. "That's not something we carry here," she said. "It's not FDA approved in the United States. From what I can see, it's used in some countries for sedation during hospice care." Hospice care. The words hit me like a physical blow. I walked outside and sat on the curb, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the credit card. I called the only person I knew would believe me and help without asking too many questions, minus my sister Jess. She lived in Sacramento, and we hadn't talked as much lately because Mark had gradually isolated me from most of my relationships. When she answered, I couldn't hold it together anymore. I told her everything, minus every single thing I had seen, heard, and felt. The strange pills, the deep sleep, the conversation I'd overheard, the email drafts, the overseas drug purchases. There was a long pause after I finished. Then she said, "Stay exactly where you are. I'm on my way." It took her 3 hours to drive to Reading. While I waited, I sat at the back of the store near the bathrooms, keeping one eye on the front doors the entire time, terrified that Mark would somehow find me. When Jess arrived, she hugged me tight, and I almost broke down again. Then she said, "We're going to the hospital right now." At the emergency room, I told them I thought I was being poisoned. I asked them to run a toxicology screen, explaining that I had been feeling drugged, confused, and groggy every day despite not being prescribed any sedatives. They took my request seriously and did the blood work immediately. 2 hours later, a doctor came in with results that confirmed my worst fears. "We found sedatives in your system," he said. "High levels of substances that aren't commonly prescribed anymore. They're primarily used to sedate patients before surgery or sometimes for palliative care." I hadn't been prescribed any sedatives. Not once. When he asked if someone might have had access to my food or drinks, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "My husband brings me all my meals and medications." They admitted me that night for observation and safety. Mark called repeatedly, but I didn't answer. He sent text after text, "Where are you? I came home and you were gone. I'm so worried." "Then, please just call me. I'm scared something happened to you." I showed every message to the nurses. They said I needed to file a police report immediately. The next morning, a detective named Officer Grady came to my room. I told him everything I could remember, and he listened carefully, taking detailed notes. He asked me to write it all down in my own words, then requested Mark's full name and our address. Later that day, the hospital moved me to a secure wing under a different name. That's when I realized they believed me completely, and that this case was being taken very seriously. But I had no idea how deep this conspiracy actually went. 3 days passed while I stayed under observation in that secure hospital wing. The doctors worked to flush the sedatives from my system and monitored me around the clock. Every nurse called me by the fake name on my chart, and Officer Grady visited daily, each time with new questions that suggested the investigation was expanding rapidly. On the 4th day, he came in with a completely different look in his eyes, minus a mixture of anger and disbelief. "We pulled some things," he said carefully. "It's much bigger than just a bad husband." I sat up straighter in the bed, my heart already pounding. He told me they had obtained a search warrant for the house, minus he didn't explain exactly how they fast-tracked it, but he made it clear that what they'd found in my blood work had made judges very cooperative. They searched Mark's office first and found a thick file of all my medical records, printed out and meticulously organized. Every page was highlighted and annotated with handwritten notes. None of that was necessarily illegal, but it showed an obsessive level of attention to my medical condition. Then they checked his computer, and that's where things got truly disturbing. They found not just one draft email to my doctor, but 6 different versions, all written as if they were from me. Some were dated months ago, meaning he had been planning this for a very long time. Each email gradually escalated my reported symptoms, building a case that I was losing control of both my mind and body. He was systematically creating a medical narrative that would make my eventual death seem inevitable and natural. But they found something even worse, minus a folder on his desktop labeled Endgame. Inside was a fake medical power of attorney document that listed Mark as my sole decision maker for all medical choices. It was completely filled out and signed, but not by me. The signature was a forgery, and not even a particularly good one. Officer Grady explained that Mark was preparing for a long main-term plan, something calculated and methodical. But that still wasn't the worst part. Hidden in the back of his closet, they found a burner phone. On it were dozens of text messages between Mark and his mother, Sharon, going back months. Some were just weird and cryptic, "She's staying down longer now, and you were right about the dose." Others were absolutely chilling. "Doctor said if she doesn't respond, next steps will be comfort measures. That's when we act." And the worst one, time-stamped it just 2 weeks before I overheard their conversation. "Hospital equals final phase. Once she's admitted, I'll push for DNR. You'll get your check." I blinked in confusion. "What check?" I asked. Officer Grady paused, clearly dreading what he had to tell me next. "Do you have life insurance?" I shook my head. "Not through work, minus I lost my coverage when I stopped teaching because of the illness." He nodded slowly. "Well, you did have a private policy. It was taken out almost 6 months ago." I stared at him. "That's not possible. I never signed anything." "It wasn't taken out in your name," he continued. "It was in his name, but on your life. You can do that as a spouse, but he had to forge your initials on the health disclosure forms." I felt like I was going to be sick. "How much?" "The payout was $500,000, and the beneficiary wasn't Mark." My stomach dropped. "Who?" "Sharon. His mother." The full scope of their plan hit me like a truck. It wasn't just Mark acting alone, minus his mother was his co-conspirator from the beginning. They had planned this together, slowly and carefully. They poisoned me, faked medical records, and created an elaborate scheme that would look like a long illness that finally claimed my life. Mark would appear to be the grieving, devoted husband who had done everything possible to save his wife. Sharon would seem like the heartbroken mother minus law who had watched her son suffer through my decline. And together they would walk away $500,000 richer. But I didn't die because I happened to overhear one sentence at exactly the right moment. The day they arrested Mark, I watched it happen live on my sister's phone. Jess had a friend who lived across the street from our house, and she pulled up the doorbell camera feed. I wasn't there I wasn't ready to go back to that house, maybe ever but I needed to see this moment. Mark stepped outside that morning, holding a 2-go coffee cup like it was just another ordinary day. He had absolutely no idea that plainclothes officers were waiting for him. The detectives approached casually, and he actually smiled at first. He probably thought they were neighbors or contractors working in the area. Then one of them showed his badge and said Mark's full name. I watched his face completely change. The color drained from his cheeks and his mouth fell open. They cuffed him right there on the front lawn in broad daylight for all the neighbors to see. Sharon was inside when they executed the search warrant. I found out later that she started screaming the moment they read it to her, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. She tried to say that I had mental problems and was confused, that Mark was just trying to protect me from myself. That line of defense didn't work anymore, not after what they had found. The emails, the drug orders, the fake documents, the insurance policy, the text messages it was all there in black and white. She tried to shift all the blame onto Mark, claiming he had lied to her and told her I was already terminal, that I wanted to die with dignity and she was just trying to help facilitate my wishes. But one text message buried her completely once it's done. I want my half immediately. They were both charged with multiple felonies. Mark faced attempted murder, insurance fraud, forgery, and illegal possession of controlled substances. Sharon was charged with conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to attempted murder. The district attorney said it was one of the most calculated domestic violence cases they had seen in the county in over 10 years. It took 9 months for the case to go to trial. I testified, telling the jury everything I've told you. My doctors testified about the sedatives found in my system and the suspicious medical requests. They showed the jury the text messages, the receipts for illegal drugs, and my forged medical records. Mark sat there every single day, staring straight ahead like a statue. He never showed any emotion, never looked at me directly. Sharon, on the other hand, wouldn't even look in my direction, as if ignoring me could somehow make this all disappear. The jury didn't need long to deliberate. Guilty on all charges. Mark got 30 muros, 2 years in prison. Sharon got 18. When the sentences were read, neither of them showed any emotion. But as they were being led out in handcuffs, I swear Mark turned back and looked at me one last time. There was no anger, no sorrow, no regret. Just complete emptiness, like looking into the eyes of a shark. After the trial ended, I finally allowed myself to cry. Right there in the courthouse parking lot, in my sister's arms, I let out everything I had been holding in for months. All the doubt, confusion, fear, and trauma came crashing down at once. I cried for the years I had wasted with him, for how close I had come to dying, for trusting someone who looked me in the eye every day and told me he loved me while slowly poisoning me behind my back. But I didn't just survive this ordeal I fought back intelligently and strategically, and I won. About a month after the trial, I got a letter in the mail from a law firm in San Francisco. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail, but something made me open it. It was about my father, who had passed away 5 years earlier. He was a quiet man who lived simply and didn't seem to leave much behind when he died. Or so I thought. It turns out he had set up a trust fund for both me and Jess when I turned 40. Jess had already claimed her portion, but I hadn't received mine due to a clerical mix-up with the paperwork. The law firm had been trying to reach me for over a year, but Mark had updated my contact information 2 years earlier, redirecting everything to himself. I now had access to a trust account with over $240,000 in it. The irony was almost poetic. Mark had tried to kill me for $500,000, and because of his actions, I discovered I already had nearly half that amount sitting in my name, completely untouched. I used some of that money to buy a new place in Grass Valley, a quiet town with clean air and a much safer feeling than reading. I used another chunk to help Jess renovate her house as a thank you for saving my life. And I donated $10,000 to the Reading Women's Shelter, anonymously, just in case there was another woman out there whose husband was helping her a little too much. As for me, I got stronger slowly but surely. The sedatives worked their way out of my system completely, though the doctors warned that some of the symptoms might stick around permanently. My nervous system took a real hit, but I didn't care. I was alive minus really, truly alive. I got a dog and named him Murphy. He's a German Shepherd mix who sleeps right by my bed every night and growls whenever anyone steps too close to the front door. He's the best security system I could ask for. I don't date, and I don't plan to anytime soon. People sometimes ask if I miss Mark, and the answer is complicated. I don't miss him minus I miss who I thought he was. But that person never actually existed. The real Mark is the one rotting in a prison cell right now. And Sharon, his sweet, church minus going, bake minus sale organizing mother, is sitting 2 floors below him in the same facility. As for me, I'm here. Still healing, still breathing, stronger every day. I watch the sunrise from my own front porch every morning, with no one standing over me, whispering about when I'll finally be gone. I survived because I trusted my instincts, acted quickly when it mattered, and never gave up fighting for my life. And that's a lesson I'll carry with me forever.